Well, first off, I watched Murder Anyone the other day and absolutely fell in love with it. It was so funny, but it had so much heart to it, like all at the same time. Just wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Um, and this was one of your father's plays. What inspired you to adapt this one to film?
It was one of my dad's last creative endeavors. Before he passed away, he wrote this play and he also like directed the play and put it on at the Whitefire Theater. And It was like inspired because before he even wrote this play, he had done a few other plays, and I was like, Dad, why are you wasting your time writing plays when you could be writing movies? Like you could actually make money doing movies. And then so he wrote this play about that argument that we had, and I thought it was just kind of funny and very fitting to turn that into a movie.
That is really funny that it was literally taken from real life.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because it's like the struggle that we all have as artists. It's about like do we go with our heart and do the art, or do we go and do commerce? And it's that battle that we all have, and finding the happy medium of what gets made and what doesn't. And I think it's an internal battle all artists have. And you know it's uh it's interesting to dive into that, especially with the lens of comedy.
For sure. Um, and I know you more from your action thriller stuff, Fortress, Survive the Game. Were you kind of stepping out of your comfort zone to do comedy?
Yeah, I mean, this was like my first real stab at like comedy, but I was raised by a comedic writer, and so I mean, I've been around comedy all my life, and I kind of shied away from doing comedy because I didn't want people to say like, oh, he just got into making movies because like his dad gave him a leg up or whatever. But yeah, that people said that anyway. It didn't really matter that I didn't do the comedy genre. And in doing Fortress and Survive the Game and those types of movies that are like action movies, they're definitely part of that formula of like there's an action formula. And so it was very nice to step out of that and do something that really had no formula. This movie is off the wall bonkers, and you'd never really know what where it's going to go or what's going to happen.
For sure. There were so many twists and turns that I had to like pause a few times and like rewind a little bit just to make sure I didn't miss something, but I didn't. It was just crazy.
Yeah, it was just completely insane. And big ups to all of my actors who pretty much have to play like the roles like 5 to 6 different ways, which I thought was very fun. And I definitely appreciate them. And I don't know if you were able to stick around for the mid credit scene, or if you knew there was one, but there is a really special mid credit scene that I hope everybody sticks around to check out.
Oh my God, I lost it at that scene. I was like, because I was just laughing, 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 and then it got to that, and I was just like, oh my God, like tears.
Oh, I really appreciate it. It's one of those things where this movie is very silly and wacky, like my dad, but also at the same time, it's very heartfelt, and I think, it wears its heart on its sleeve, and I think the mid credit scene really very much points out why and what we were making this for.
For sure. Um, and because this was such a personal story for you, what was this process like for you?
It was a really weird process, to be honest, because like I had like multiple different directors in my head. I had my dad and what he had done, and what the play that I had seen of his, and then I had me who wanted to make this movie and honor him but also still have my voice somewhere in there. And then I also had the two writers that are writing the story, which I felt like kind of informed the look and feel of what the movie would have, because I wanted to make it as how those characters would imagine it.
I never thought of it that way. That's really interesting.
So, and I also tried to preserve and not overcomplicate the filmmaking process by still making it at all times, even when it was a movie, still kind of feel like a play.
Yeah, it was really cool, like watching it go from like almost like a black box theater to being in a house, and it's just interesting.
Oh, thank you. And being recast.
Yeah, like I didn't expect a recast in the middle of a movie.
I know, I thought that was funny. I thought that was funny.
Was all of that stuff in the script?
So some stuff was in the script, some stuff wasn't. Um, so the recast was not in the script. That was just an idea that I had, and then the stunt doubles was not in the script because originally what they did is they did during the play they did wire work and like had like people in black holding them up when they would do like jump kicks and stuff. Um, but that wouldn't really work in a movie, so I decided to do the stunt double route for the movie.
It was everything that was added in there was just so funny, and it was so just my kind of humor that I'm like, this is perfect.
Oh, wow. I really appreciate that. I mean, did you grow up with my dad's cartoons?
I did. I did.
Yeah. Well, there you go. It's very much like, a living cartoon in many ways as well. It's very zany, like, Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain.
Yeah. Oh, it was just like that nice bit of nostalgia that I needed.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I was very excited that I was able to get Maurice LaMarche, who was the voice of the Brain, and also my dad's best friend, to be in the movie, because I thought that added an extra layer, and he was doing an impression of my dad for the whole movie, so I thought that was an interesting thing to have as well.
That's really interesting. I knew that he was in the movie and had voiced the Brain, but I didn't realize that they were that close.
Yes, yeah, he actually knew my dad longer than I've known. I knew my dad. He was telling stories on set about how he was there when I was born. And I was like, and then Charlie, who played Charlie in the movie, was my dad's writing partner for his entire career. So, who better to know how my dad intended the jokes to land than him? I mean, a lot of that I think really worked because of the chemistry of those two guys.
And I'm sure they felt like strangling each other at times.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did.
Um, did any of the other cast members have this kind of direct relationship with your father?
Yeah, so Carla Collins, who played Marie, the medium slash psychic, was the person who played Marie when my dad put on the play. And so, my dad would always rave about how much he loved her performance in that. And so I thought it was just, fitting to put her in it. And also, she had an inside scoop on, how my dad was directing the play during the time of the play because she was there for all the rehearsals and when it was on.
Well, that's awesome. Um, and the rest of the cast didn't have this direct relationship with your father, but how did you kind of like cast them? Like, what was it about them that really made you go, yes, you're now in this movie?
I mean, a lot of the people that I worked with on this, aside from Christos, who I had worked with before, he was in Survive the Game, and him and I, had built the friendship, and I think he just really understood the project. A lot of the other people, it was really just based on like conversations and if they understood both the material and what I was trying to do and were willing to be as wacky as possible.
Nice. Um, what was it like working with an ensemble of people with such a crazy, funny script?
I mean, it was very funny on set. Like we were all cracking jokes and laughing a lot, which I think was really helpful to have so many funny and silly people on set because it got me very much not focused on how both emotionally difficult it was to make the movie as well. It's weird to say because it's such a fun and wacky movie, but you know, emotionally, it definitely was a experience in and of itself. And you know, the hardest scene for me to film ended up being the mid credit scene.
Oh, well, it got me crying, so I can only imagine how you felt with that.
I appreciate that, and I'm glad you stuck around. I hope everybody sticks around for that because, you know, it doesn't necessarily, you know, hindsight's 2020, but it doesn't necessarily seem like a movie that like for sure has one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Um, and your father has had an incredible career, and you have your own incredible career. But how has your father influenced your career?
I mean, my dad was the biggest influence on my career I think anybody could ever have. I mean, you know, when I was little, my dad used to show me movies and he would pause the film um and say like, hey, you know, why is the camera moving like that or this or that. He would always show me like the classics like, you know, Casablanca or like, you know, Maltese Falcon, and I would always just be like, oh, you know, like I thought he was just making sure I was paying attention. But you know, the older I got, the more I realized like, no, he was showing me how to analyze film. And he's definitely the main reason why I fell in love with film in general, and that love of filmmaking and the film process is what's propelled me to want to make movies. And he was always my biggest cheerleader. Um, so you know, I just think you know that support system um, uh, definitely drove me to want to be a filmmaker. And you know, he definitely put a love of film into me before I ever knew what that was.
I love that. What would you say was the biggest piece of advice he ever gave you?
You know, he was a nonstop barrel of advice. He was nonstop giving me advice. So there's so many nuggets. But one thing that really felt pertinent to this film is my dad always told me, until you're 30, make every single movie that you possibly can because you're learning on somebody else's, you know, budgets. Basically, you're learning how to be a filmmaker. You're finding your voice as a filmmaker, and just you know, no matter what you do, make as many movies as possible as a director because you know at some point in your life every movie you made before you were 30 will be known as your early work. And Murder Anyone was the last movie I made before I was 30. It was the one that I made, and a week later I turned 30, and so it was a nice way to end that that chapter of my life. And you know, the the nonstop filmmakingness that I was in. And you know, since then I've pulled back and I'm trying to only do one a year now, when I was doing many more per year. And now you know, I've pulled back to wanting to do one and try and build them to be bigger and better. And you know, that was just on the game plan and advice that my father had given me.
Well, that's awesome. That is great advice. So kind of building off of that, what are you working on at the moment?
Well, I just wrapped after a long 2 month shoot. So I don't know if you could tell. We just wrapped 2 days ago. I don't know if you could tell my voice is a little tired, because I'm just tired in general because we were just doing this long shoot. But I we just wrapped, and it's this movie called Darkness of Man that I directed, and it's a very gritty, very violent noir action film. that's led by a solid performance by Jean Claude Van Damme, and I'm really excited for people to see this. It's really something unique. It does not fit into the mold of most of these action movies. There's a lot of action, but it's very, very dark, very noir, very gritty. There's a lot of narration and crazy lighting setups that we have, and it's really something I think people are going to be surprised about.
That's really exciting. Um, do you plan to film any of your father's other scripts?
I do. That might actually be the next thing that I shoot. My dad left me many scripts, and I'm going to periodically be chipping away, doing probably one every other year. At this point, he left me about 7 scripts.
Oh, nice.
So,
Do you have one in mind?
yeah, I think the next one will either be Angel Fire or Forget About It. Angel Fire is a thriller that he wrote, and then Forget About It is a comedic play that he wrote. And so my next one that I do of his is going to be one of those two.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. We are just about at time, but is there anything else you would like to add about Murder Anyone?
I just hope everybody goes into it with an open mind, understands that it's a wacky, crazy, zany movie. I don't think it's like anything most people have seen, and it just gets weirder and weirder as it goes on. But I hope people, enjoy the ride and realize that there was a lot of heart that went into this thing, and I hope people take a second to give it a chance.
I love it. And yeah, like I said, I loved it. I laughed, I cried. Wonderful.
Well, that's a great review. I appreciate that, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, and thank you so much for watching the film.
Of course. Yeah, thank you for agreeing to chat as well.